Welcome back to Coffee with a Closer, where we're sitting down with top producing real estate agents to learn some of the stories behind their success. My guest today is actually not a real estate agent. She's a leadership coach, a keynote speaker, and an author. So I'm so glad to have Paula Jenkins with me today. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. I know you had a super busy day today, so I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and have this conversation with me.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So before we get started, I would love to learn just a little bit about your background. Tell me about who you are, how'd you get started, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I always, kind of start with, I think I was literally born a leader. And I say that only because, sometimes as children, we're called certain things like bossy and all the things. But I had a 20-year career in corporate America. And I left about 8 years ago. And so my story really starts with two numbers, 180 over 140. Okay. That was my blood pressure. And I start off saying that because it's really important to why I do what I do as we kind of talk through this conversation.
Yeah.
But so much of what I believe in is how we have to create better leaders.
Okay.
And I led a lot of teams, I led a lot of organizations, and what I just recognize is too often we can be really great at what we do, but especially when you are promoted or are asked to lead groups in what I call people management, people are missing some of those skills. And so I do what I do because I recognize the power of coaching people, training people, mentoring people in the area of leadership development. So my real story is I was in that corporate job for almost, company for 20 years.
Okay.
And I led, again, a lot of teams, a lot of people, and I saw a lot of things. I saw a lot of things. And so I'm really on a mission to change the world, one conversation at a time.
That's amazing. That must have taken a lot of courage to kind of just start out, stop your corporate career and just kind of bet on yourself, really, right?
Yeah, it did. And it's one of those moments where I think for me in particular, when somebody says to you, you better change your work environment or you're going to die. I say this all the time when I speak because it's important for people to hear me when I say that. That's what my doctor said. You're going to die. And I remember in that moment saying, I'm sorry, what did you say? I'm not dying over a job. Exactly. But what we don't understand is there's a lot of people who are in really bad, toxic environments. A lot of people who have bosses, managers, leaders, whatever you want to call them, who don't treat them with respect. And so we have to sometimes make a decision about, this isn't the right place for me. And after that conversation with my doctor, I realized it's time for me to leave. And though I didn't necessarily want to leave, I recognized I wasn't dying over a job. And so I always say the courage really came from me just recognizing I want to actually live and I want to be happy. And that's how I live now. That's literally how I live.
So how did you get started, though? I mean, did you just know that this was something you wanted to do, or?
So yes and no. So I had always said that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I really did, very young, all the things. But I also recognized, at least a little bit, for those who are kind of around me, entrepreneurship is hard.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about, leaving a paycheck, because that's what you're doing if you do this full time, that's not guaranteed, right? And so after I decided to leave corporate America, I said, okay, what am I good at? And I really had two passions. My first passion was financial literacy.
Okay.
And my other passion was leadership development. And the financial literacy part came in because so many people in my generation had not been taught about finances. When we grew up, it was always about that's grown people's talk. We don't talk about money.
Right.
Well, when you don't talk about money, we make a lot of bad mistakes.
Sure.
And so I spent a lot of time coaching and doing workshops about how to budget, how to get out of debt, those kinds of things. But the other part of this was I loved leadership development, and I had managed many people over the years. In my corporate job, I had led manager prep courses. I was asked to train people. And so what I recognized is, okay, I can do this. And I think as an entrepreneur, starting a business, again, I didn't know any of that part. I didn't know all the things that come with it.
Right.
But what I did know is I'm good at these two topics. And so I started off by coaching. I started off by speaking. And it just kind of went on. And I've been in business for the last 8 years. And the last probably 3 years, I have focused specifically on the leadership development. And that part, again, came from I left corporate because of a bad manager. But I recognize there's so many people who are so good at their job and Michelle, they're so good at their job.
Sure.
They're really great as an individual contributor, but the moment they are promoted, nobody trains them, nobody coaches them, nobody mentors them. And that's the part that I'm really good at. And so I decided that for these, like I said, the last few years, that I would really want to focus on that part of it. So that's how I got here. It's majority of my clients have been referrals because somebody has either seen me speak or somebody's worked with me, and I've been referred. And that's a beautiful thing. And I'll continue to do this work until I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, that's amazing. So tell me about that. Do you like go to companies and do like programs, or is this like individuals that you work with?
Great question. Yeah, so it's a combination. So a lot of times, one, I'll just start off with the main one, which is speaking. And so I love to speak, and organizations, companies, conferences can hire me and have hired me to come and speak at their conferences.
Okay.
But I also have organizations who have reached out to hire me for retreats for all of their employees, for their management, for the executive teams. And that has looked in different ways. It can be, I've done 1 hour, I've done 2 hours, I've done half days, I've done full days, I've done multi-days. So organizations who specifically are looking for what I would call engaging speakers is really important.
Okay.
And that's what I am, but it's really taking the time to understand all the pieces of what you're trying to train. A lot of times we talk about difficult conversations, how to have them. We talk about communication. One of my taglines is everything begins and ends with communication. And so I spent a lot of time talking about that in terms of DISC, the DISC assessment, my emotional intelligence assessments. And so companies hire me to come in to help. Some will say, yes, we want to just for the one time, but others come in and say, yeah, let's do this ongoing. And I have clients who have hired me to coach some of their top executives, some of their managers, but also do ongoing workshops. So it just kind of depends on what a company's looking for and what they hire me for.
Okay. So you mentioned DISC, and you were actually a speaker at my mastermind for real estate agents, because a lot of the audience is kind of real estate agents and, some things tools for them, right? So can you explain a little bit about what is DISC and why is it important to understand?
Yeah. So DISC is a communication assessment tool. And one of the things I always tell people when I do these, when I talk about it, this is not about putting people in a box. This is not about saying this is who you are. And no, we all comprise of all the styles. And there's 4 styles in the DISC. And it's important to understand only because, again, remember I said, everything begins and ends with communication.
Yeah.
The DISC assessment is all about your communication styles. And I always say, there are lots and lots of different assessments. People have heard of Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, there's all kinds. The reason I use DISC is because it is so important to understand how we show up. So what does that mean? So you can have somebody who is a D, who is a very dominant type of person, and they are extremely direct. You can have an influential person who is very, what I call high energy and a people person. You have an S, more steady, right? They want you to be friendly. They don't want any drama. And then you have C, the people who are really analytical. And so by understanding who you're talking to, it allows you to understand, okay, how do I need to address this person? How do I need to make sure that maybe I change how I show up? I have said for many years, I'm an extremely direct person. It's not a bad thing, but everybody's not going to necessarily appreciate or even like my directness. So part of that is when I start talking to somebody, I quickly start assessing who am I talking to. If I'm talking to somebody who maybe is an I, immediately I'm thinking to myself, okay, they're going to want to have some conversation with me before we get into whatever the detail is. Somebody who is that C, the person who really needs, I call it the analytical person, they're going to need some data. They're going to need detail. When you start understanding that, no matter what role you're in, no matter what industry you're in, no matter who you're talking to, it helps you. It's been said many times over when you start understanding this, that it's game changing. And it's game changing because, again, I'm going to say this 1,000 times. Everything begins and ends with communication. And when you understand that, you will start understanding why your relationships, why job, all the things, personal, professional, why it's being impacted. And what DISC allows you to do is get some kind of insight on how you're showing up, but also how you can start identifying with people where they are. And even the assessments that I do with people, I have one where I specifically talk about emotional intelligence as well. And emotional intelligence is important because it's a combination of taking what how you communicate, but emotional intelligence is also now saying, well, how are you showing up? By putting those two together, it really does change the game when it comes to relationships.
So, you know, me as a mortgage lender, right? Obviously, I work with a lot of different people that are probably all different spectrums of the
Yes.
DISC personality, right? Same for real estate agents. What are some maybe tools or things that I should listen for that give me like clues as to kind of how I need to communicate with them?
Yeah. So for people who are what I call, as I said, direct and really want get to the point. And
Okay.
I'm doing that in particular because you can tell a lot of times people who are short and they're not trying to listen for all the details. They're you know, they may just are not paying attention. And as what they're saying, can you give me the point? Or they may just ask, can you just tell me what it is? Somebody like that, listen. Because if you give them too many details, if you go off and have, you know, stories about how your weekend is, you're going to turn them off. And what people don't understand is those reactions immediately changes whether or not you're going to get the business or not.
Okay.
And so people don't understand that sometimes those first impressions, that's the turnoff. Now, somebody who maybe one of the first things they ask you is, how was your weekend? How's it going? Tell me a little bit about yourself, whatever. You're just not meeting. I'm thinking to myself, why are they asking me all these questions? Because they're probably an I. There's somebody who actually wants to converse with you and have a real conversation before we get into details. If you don't do that, what ends up happening, they say, well, they don't care about me. They're turned off. You just want to get to details. You just want to get to the business. Well, how about you learn about me? That kind of person, understand that. You'll have a much better relationship and you'll probably close the deals with them because they're saying, she actually asked me some questions about myself.
She cares,
She
right?
cares, correct. Then if you have somebody who is asking you for lots of details, and I mean, they want to understand the background, they want to understand these, and they may say, hey, give me a few days. Don't get offended by that. That's not what they're saying is I need time to process. When you don't do that, they're going to immediately say, so you don't care about the details. That's going to be a problem for you. And so when you think about how people are communicating with you and talking to you by understanding that, this is where you as a person, and this is where the emotional intelligence comes in.
Okay.
It's your self-awareness. It's very easy for somebody to say, well, this is who I am. Why do I have to adjust who I am? And my answer always is, so how is that working out for you? So you don't think that it's important to meet the people where they are? We have to do that. So as I said, as much as I was extremely direct in my corporate career. I'm a much more relationship type person now. I recognize that. And so it doesn't mean that I'm meeting somebody who is analytical, who's what we call the C. If I meet them, I recognize, Paula, you're going to have to give them the detail. I don't care about the detail, but they do. And by listening and understanding that, this gives you a much better way of understanding how to do the work with your client. So those are the kinds of things I think from just a tool perspective is pick up on some of that and understand it. And in some cases, ask. I'm amazed at the number of times we meet with people. We don't say, so tell me about your communication style. Some people may not understand that.
Yeah.
But some people may say immediately like, well, I like this. Okay, and you start listening for that. We unfortunately don't listen. That's part of our problem. You know, this whole active listening piece. We don't listen to people. And we immediately go to how we want to close or how we want to do things. And instead of saying, let me figure out who this person is. How do you want to be communicated to? You know, I tell people all the time that in my phone, for most people, I have who I think their style is.
Really?
I do.
Okay.
How I think they want to actually be communicated to, you know, in terms of, is it text, is it email, is it phone? Because we get caught up in my way is this way. Just because it's your way doesn't mean you're going to get a response. So we have to pay attention to people. And I'm not saying everybody has to do that, but what I'm saying is be aware about some of these tools you can use for yourself when it comes to how you work with people.
I love that. Yeah. Like you mentioned sometimes like when you email, right? Sometimes it's hard to kind of do tone. Where do you think a lot of miscommunication comes into play in business?
Well, we make a lot of assumptions.
Okay.
Let's just start there.
Yeah.
We make a lot of assumptions. And what we also don't do is we don't communicate. I'm going to keep saying this. Everything begins and ends with communication. When we don't ask questions, when we make assumptions about people, we lose sight that from a business perspective, if we don't know, it's okay to ask. And I think sometimes we think we're supposed to know everything. And the reality is, especially when it comes to email, there are times when people may say, I've sent an email. I've sent an email to you 3 or 4 times. So just because you sent it doesn't mean the person got it. And I think we make assumptions about somebody in terms of whether they don't care or they ghost me. Yes, they may ghost you, but in some cases, they really didn't get it. How many of us actually check our spam folders on a regular basis? On a regular basis. I've now learned, on a regular basis, you should be doing it. And I was doing it once a month, and I just found something recently where somebody a month ago, and I was like, you should be doing this every week. But the reality is we can make an assumption about somebody, and because we're not doing our due diligence, we can miss out on that. Yeah. So part of this is just recognizing that, especially when it comes to email. Don't assume that everybody gets your email. Don't assume that even if you think it was delivered, technology has issues. I've had people literally say to me, they've texted me, they've emailed me. I can literally show them my phone and say, look, I never got it. So I want us to understand that when we talk to people and communicate with people, don't just rely on this one method. Please understand, reach out and say, hey, I sent this. Did you get it? Hey, I sent this 3 weeks ago. Haven't heard from you. I just want to check in. Sometimes give people the opportunity to actually be able to respond to you and not just thinking it's just one way. Yeah. That's what we have to stop doing. We have to stop doing the assumptions.
Yeah, I love that. So ask people how they like to communicate,
yes,
and then follow up on maybe a few different ways, right?
Yes.
Maybe it's email, maybe it's a call, maybe it's a
yes,
text, but those are important to kind of figure out what their communication style is.
Exactly.
So let's say I'm a realtor and I'm working with somebody that's like a high D, right? So they're very direct. Do you have any advice or maybe anything that you would suggest if I'm working with somebody that's a D?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is, one, be aware they don't want a whole bunch of fluff. And I say that from a place of they really are direct and they are results driven, meaning give them exactly what they're asking for. Don't go into a whole bunch of other stuff. Give them what they need. The other piece of that is understanding that their tone, and this is important, the tone is not meant to offend. It really isn't. Because they're direct, they're like, let's just get to it. I don't want to talk about all these other things. I don't want all the data. Just tell me what I want. Sometimes people who are extremely direct, they may recognize that their tone is not the best. They're not assuming that they're offending somebody, but the person receiving it is maybe offended. So part of this is being very clear and having a conversation about what somebody's tone is and just saying, hey, I used to say it all the time. If I offend you, please let me know.
Okay.
Please let me know, because that's not my intention, but I recognize because I was so direct and I was like, I don't have time for this. That can come across really, really concerning. So for me, it's about understanding that somebody who is extremely direct, be aware of that, but also ask the questions. Hey, is this how you want to receive the information? Hey, when we're talking XYZ, again, everything begins and ends with communication. I love saying that because I want people to really understand it really does make a difference. And when you start understanding who you're talking to, I'm going to say this again, it is a game changer. It really is, because your relationships change. In talking to somebody who is whichever one, you're going to understand what they need.
Can somebody be more than just a D or an I or an S?
Absolutely. So every now and then I do come across people who, when they do the assessment, there's a kind of an equal across the board, and others who have maybe two of them at the same time. For example, a D and an I. So somebody who's extremely direct, but also somebody who is an I, who really wants to have a conversation first and be relationship oriented. That's actually great, and it's who I've become. And it's one of those things where I think it's because of your environment, it's because of the stress levels that we have, how you think you're supposed to show up, all of that plays into it. So yes, there are people who can absolutely have both. You can, in some cases be the D and the C. And that doesn't happen always, but it can. And I know people who are C's, who are extremely analytical, who have said over and over again, I need data. You've got to give me time to process what you're telling me. But then at the same time, they also know there's points in time they have to be a D. They have to be direct. And so even though they know they need, they want to have time, they say, in this case, I have to make a decision very quickly. They can do it. So there's absolutely times when you can have, again, I remember I said at the beginning, you can have all four. We all do. It's just how much of it comes out when it needs to. And that's the part where I want everybody to understand is when we talk about communication, it is really, really, really critical to understand who you are, then start understanding who you're talking to as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's great advice. Let's talk a little bit about leadership. What are some qualities that maybe you would recognize as somebody that is a good leader?
Yeah, so I'm going to start off with the number one for me, empathy. And so if you would have asked me that probably about 10 years ago, I would have a very different answer. But what I have learned, not only in my own leadership style, but also in what I see in my clients, what I've seen just in general in organizations, we lack empathy. And when we have the ability to show empathy to people, it is amazing what it can do to a team. It is amazing what it can do to an organization. And it's amazing what it can do even for you. When you can put yourself in somebody else's shoes and just listen. It doesn't mean you understand, but listen. Show that you even care. And here's the thing, even by doing that, it doesn't mean it will change the outcome.
Okay.
But empathy is critical. The second one is a great communicator. I think so often when we talk about leadership, which is why I do the work that I do, is we're not communicating in a way that helps anybody. And we get so caught up in us, and not recognizing how we have to adjust. And that's why I say meet people where they are.
Yeah.
When you communicate and you can understand that I have to talk to this person this way, and maybe this person this way, this is not being inauthentic. What it's just saying is you recognize in order to get what you need, you have to make sure you're talking to people in a way that they can understand it, right? And how they communicate with you. And then I'll be honest, my biggest one is integrity. I don't hear that enough when it comes to leadership. And the reason why that's important, I find that we don't talk enough about ethics. And I think when it comes to leadership, there's some things that I have seen, things I've been told over the years where people have lacked some integrity. And as much as I know that's one like, what? We don't talk about nothing. We just don't. So empathy, communicator, and integrity to me are really important. And all the other, values are important. But for me, based on the work that I do, this is what I really want to see, because I've also seen how people treat each other. And I'm always stunned when I hear people who've said their bosses yelled at them. And I say, in what world is that okay? I don't understand that. And so part of this is, again, making sure that we communicate in ways that have respect.
Yeah, no, awesome. So you have a book coming out, correct?
I do.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so my book is called Show Up Like You Mean It, Living, Leading, and Speaking Your Truth. And it is a book, has 10 chapters in it, and I break down all kinds of different ways of how to be authentic. So how do you live authentically? How do you lead? How do you show up authentically on social media? How do you pray authentically? How do you have relationships authentically? One of the things that I have found over the years, in this book, I started 5 years ago.
Really?
5 years ago. And it really stemmed from somebody who had seen me in many different hats many years ago, and had said to me, "You're one of the most authentic leaders I've ever met." And I thought it was a very strange comment, just because it's not how I saw myself. It's just, I'm just being Paula. I'm unapologetically Paula. I say that all the time. And what it made me realize is so many of us, and I'll include myself, we wear masks. And we don't always show up as who we are, and whether that's because of the environment. And so I decided to write this book because of my clients, my own background, and I just recognized it was time for me to say, you can be authentic. I'm amazed at the number of people that I've come across after maybe hearing me speaking, and they'll say, yes, you're engaging, but you're really authentic. And you gave me permission to be authentic. And I would be very surprised by that, because I'm thinking, you don't need permission.
Right.
You don't need permission. But what I recognize for some people, yes, they do. Because again, depending upon their background, their experiences, they recognize I can't show up as myself. And even in the last few weeks, as we've prepared for this and all the things with the book and how exciting it is, people have reached out to me about, there was one comment that I have when we talk about what do people get when they get you? And I want people to stop performing and instead be present. And somebody sent me a message about that, and I said, and this is why I wrote the book. Because they said, I had said that at a summit a couple years ago, and they said that still resonates with me. And so clearly we're shrinking. Clearly we go to environments and we shrink, and clearly we don't show up. And so that's why the book, again, is Show Up Like You Mean It. Living, leading, and speaking your truth. I want us all to be who we are. And I want to be clear, that doesn't mean, and I won't curse, but here's what I say. That doesn't
I don't think
mean,
I have a rating, so you can curse if you want to.
I was gonna say, this means don't don't be an a-hole, right? Don't say this is just who I am. No, you can be authentic, but recognize you can grow. Recognize that's what life is we should always be growing. We should always get better. None of us are perfect. And so when I come across people say I'm authentic and but I'm still having these issues, and I'm like, okay, but do you feel like you can grow? But if they say no, okay, so that means you're perfect. Well, no, I'm not perfect. But you just said you don't think, but you can. We all can. And so what I've tried to do in this book is really focus on giving some tools and some, I do this thing called Action Changes Things, and really giving people some things to really focus on to help them answer certain questions, do certain activities, to get them to a place of stop shrinking. I want you to show up, and I want you to show up like you mean it.
I love that. I can't wait to read your book. I'm so excited.
Thank you.
So if somebody wants to read your book, well, how could they do that? Can they pre-order, or where do they go to order the book?
Great question. So depending upon, timing, the book drops June 19th. And right now people can go to showuplikeyoumeenit.com. And when they go to that site, it has the pre-launch information. And the beautiful thing about this book is it is available on all major retailers. And so they can pick wherever, they get their books and go there. So
awesome. I can't wait to read it. All right, before we wrap up, I do have a couple of rapid fire questions that I want to ask you. So what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Ever received? That's a really great question. I've gotten some really good feedback and good advice. I really have. I'll be honest. I think maybe it's because of just the book. Be you. Be you. And that's important to me because I remember many years ago, somebody who said it to me is worrying about how I was showing up, and just be you.
Yeah.
Just be you.
Speaking of books, what's the best book, or what's the book that's maybe impacted you the most that you've read?
Oh, that's a hard one. Because I'm a reader.
Okay.
And so I always say, I never want to just say the one book because I have way too many books, honestly, that I love. I'll just say Malcolm Gladwell has a ton of books, and I love all of his books, but Outliers was the best one. And I always say when that question is asked, that's the one book that I just think was a game changer for me, Outliers.
Outliers, yeah. Okay. What's one daily habit that contributes to some of your success?
Oh, that's funny. That is a great question. And a daily habit, I don't think that I have one. I will say this. I used to have one, and it was to walk every day.
Okay.
I used to have one. And the reason I say that is I don't walk as much as I used to just because of some challenges I have right now, but walking. And the reason that would have been the answer is it helps clear your head. It helps clear your head. It really does.
That's one thing. I'm kind of the same. Like in the summer, I love to go out and just take a walk and just like be, no headphones, just kind of listening to nature.
Yes.
But in the winter, I sometimes don't do that because I don't like the cold.
Me either. Me either. And it's terrible because when you're so used to doing it the summer, and then it's the moment it gets, I'm like, I'm not doing it. And it I know it impacts. I'd heard of what is it called, seasonal depression or something. And I was like, oh, that's real. That's real. I literally don't want to walk in the winter. I don't, at all.
All right, so the podcast is called Coffee with a Closer. Can you tell me what's your go-to drink?
Oh, my go-to drink is water.
Really?
It is water.
Okay.
When I say I love water, I love water. I'm not kidding about it. And I say, yes, it tastes fabulous. People, it doesn't have a taste. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I love water. And I will be honest, I used to drink about 2 gallons a day.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Oh, it's phenomenal. And I haven't done as much in the last few months for various reasons, but water is absolutely my go-to drink.
All right.
And
love
then
that.
after that, I would say green tea.
Okay. Well, I do appreciate, I know you're super busy. I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule, not only to help me with my mastermind, but to also be a guest on my podcast. So if somebody wanted to get in contact with you, say they need leadership training, or maybe they have speaking opportunities, where would be a good place for them to get a hold of you at?
Yeah, so the best place would be go to showuplikeyoumeenit.com. That is the absolute best place because all of my information is going to be there, and you can contact me on any of those platforms, and I would love to chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Coffee with the Closer. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm Michelle Garibay. You can reach me on my cell. I'm at 262-496-4582, and I hope you'll follow along.